Now I'm going to show you how to checkmate with a king and a rook against the king. So let's see how a checkmate looks like. In this position, we notice the black's king is on the edge of the board. Our king is directly in front of it, 2 squares away. And in this case, we can play the move rook to the back rank, which will attack all the back rank squares. And our king stops the escape of black's king forward. So this would be a checkmate. This is our final goal. All right, let's take a look at another example. So in this position, once again, very similar. Our king is taking away this path forward for the king, for the black king, and we can move our rook to the back rank. So this is what it looks like. All right, now let's take a step backwards and see how we force some patterns to force the king into that position. So let's take a look at this position. If black king were over here, we could checkmate, but he's not quite there. Fortunately, the rook, if we play a move like this, just the rook backwards, it will attack every square that the king can move to, forcing him into position where we can checkmate. So in this case, the rook is just cutting off the king's escape. All right, let's take a look at another example, very similar position. The rook is cutting away the escape square this way. Our king is cutting away these squares. Next move, black will have to play king into position where we can checkmate. So all we have to do is waste a move. Any rook move would work. Almost every rook move would work, but in this case, this is what it will look like. All right, so that's one pattern to remember. Make sure to get familiar with these patterns because they're pretty important. All right, let's take a look at another pattern. Okay, this is very similar to the last one, except we can't really move our rook to this file to force him into position. So what can we do? Well, let's notice our rook is cutting away the escape squares along this 7th rank. And also, if you were black's move, he couldn't go here because of checkmate. So all his options are to run away towards the side. So all we have to do really is waste a move. Just wait for him to make a move. Notice that if we try to get into the position, this wouldn't work because it's black's move and he can just step away. So we can chase him like this, but he'll just move away. So in this case, we just have to waste a move, wait for black to get into position, or run towards the side. So in this case, he has to run towards the side, and we chase him once again. He can't go to the right because of the checkmate example, so he has to go towards the corner, and we just chase him. Once again, he can't go in front of our king because we checkmate. And now he's in the corner, and he has to move in front of our king so we can checkmate. All right, let's look at another example, very similar, just rotated board. If the king goes here, we want to deliver a checkmate along the back rank. So we can waste a move by playing rook here. Now if the king moves to the left, we can go rook down and it's checkmate. So he has to go right, and then we chase the king. Can't go left because of checkmate. He has to go right towards the corner until he runs out of squares, and we can checkmate him. Also notice that if we would have moved the rook somewhere here to waste a move, and we go after the king, eventually the king attacks the rook, so we kind of have to move it past the square so he can never really attack it. And once he goes here, we have to waste another move. He can't go here because of checkmate, so he has to go towards the edge, and then we're back into the pattern. Okay, so that's what you can do to checkmate the black's king if he's on the edge. But what if he's not on the edge? Well, there's a very, very similar pattern to push him towards the edge. So let's take a look at this position. White's rook cuts off his king, this king along this rank over here. And we can kind of get into the same pattern as before by playing king f4. So now if the black king moves right, we can check him and push him back one one row. So he has to go left. Also, if he goes backwards, we just cut him off again. So he has to go left, and then once again we chase him. Also notice that if he ever moves right, we check him back one row. And finally he's on the edge of the board, and now we can check him. Our king defends all the escape squares, rook controls these, so he has to move back one row, and then we can follow the same pattern. We move king here because we don't want it to be our move. We can go in front of him, but he runs away, and now, well, we can also waste the move here, but we can just start off with king one square behind him. In this case, it will be the same pattern. He has to run away. If he ever moves in front of our king, we can push him back. Okay, but in this case over here, if he's attacking your rook, all you have to do is move it all the way to the other side of the board, past this square, and now it can never really get to attack your rook again because you'll just push him back. You'll have to go past this square. Okay, we have this position, but once again, if we move in front of the king, he'll just walk away. So we have to waste the move, like this. Any of these would work. This one would work also. Also notice this one does not quite work because if he moves in front, we can't check him because it will take the rook. So yeah, the rook has to be a little bit further away. Alright, the king's on the edge, and we can push him back to the last rank. And we're back to a very, very similar pattern. We chase the king. The king's attacking our rook, so we have to move it to the other side. Okay, this is the pattern we want, but we want him to step in front of us, not us in front of him. So we have to waste another move. And then we're back to the chasing the king example on the edge of the board. Alright. So if you got this far, this should be enough for you to checkmate with a king and rook against king. But if you want to see another technique that's even cooler, you can stick around. Alright, in the previous section, you saw a very good pattern to easily push the king towards the edge and checkmate him. But that takes a while because you have to chase the king every row, you have to chase the king from edge to edge. In this section, I'm going to show you a slightly faster way to checkmate. So let's first look at this pattern over here. Lichess doesn't allow me to, or doesn't remember all the squares if I highlight them. So I'm just going to do that now. Okay, so with this rook in the center, notice that it cuts the board into 4 sections. The green, the orange, the blue, and the red. And black's king will have to be in one of these sections. Okay, so in this case he's in the red area, and this technique involves making whatever area he's in, you want to make it smaller if you can. If not, you bring your king closer. So let's take a look at an example to show what I mean. Okay, so black's king's in the center, our pieces are very far away, so the first step would be to bring your own king into the center or as close as you can. So for example, you just move forward. Alright, this is as far as your king can go, and now we bring our rook in towards the center. For example, some of these paths are reasonable. Let's take a look at this one. Notice the rook is cutting away about half the board over here. But once we bring the rook in the center, for example here pushes the king a little bit back faster. So let's take a look at this one. And now we defend our rook, and we're back to the pattern I was showing in the previous chapter. So in this case, the black's king is in the red squares, and if we can make a move with the rook to another protected square by the king that makes this red area smaller, we want to do that. For example, black plays king here, so this is the area now, but we can move the rook to this square, which is also protected, and you'll make the area smaller into this area. So this is smaller, so we want to do that. So that's exactly what we need to do. Moves right, so this is the area that is covered now by the rook, but we can move the rook to another protected square that makes the area smaller. So we want to do that. All right, let's take a look at this position. This is the area. There's no protected square. This square is not protected. There's no protected square to which we can move the rook to make the area smaller. So in that case, we just bring the king closer. Also, king here would work, but we just got to bring the king closer to his king. All right, there's no square for the rook to make the area smaller, so we move the king. And in this position, this is the area covered by the rook, and there is a square that's protected over here that will make the area smaller, so we want to do that. And now he's on the edge, and once the king's on the edge, cut off along the edge, we can go back to the chasing the king pattern. So for example, we just try to follow the king, and we're pretty much back into the pattern, the same pattern as before, where we waste the move with the rook, and now if the king goes in front of our king, it's checkmate, and we just chase him towards the edge, and then we can win. All right, let's take a look at another example of this same technique. So this is another position. Black's king's in the center. Our pieces are very badly placed, so let's start by bringing our king into the center, or as close as we can. So in this case, you see the black's king is actually preventing our king from advancing, so we can actually use our rook to to force him to move out of the way, basically. And now we can bring the king in, and now we can put the rook in the center on a protected square, and we notice that the red area, the rook creates a blockade here on along this area. So black's king is just stuck in the red zone. Okay, so if we can move the rook to a protected square to make this area smaller, we could, but this square is not protected. This would be the normal square, but it's not protected, so we just bring our king in. All right, there's no way to move the rook to make the box smaller, so we just make a move with our king a little bit closer. And now we get to this position. So we want to make a move like this. Rook here would make the box smaller, but of course it's not protected because the king, the king is too far away. And also, when the king is right next to our rook and kind of right diagonally next to it, you can't really make the box smaller because whichever way you go, you'll leave some sort of space behind with the king. Anyway, in this case, we just bring our king forward, and both of these moves, so both of the blue arrows would be fine, but in this case, the diagonal one is a little bit better, as you'll see here. We create this pattern, and if the king moves here, we can actually we're into position where we can push the king further back one file. So this diagonal move is just slightly faster, but both of these moves are perfectly fine. Okay, so we can push the king back one more, and we can protect our rook. So now this is the box, very small, and if we can move the rook to a protected square to make the box smaller, we should. So in this case, over here, and we can do that again on this square. Okay, we can't really make the box smaller. We can't really cut along the edge because he'll take our rook. So we just bring the king in. Both of these moves were okay. And we can move the rook to a protected square to make this box smaller. So this will be the square here. You can also give a check to push him back. And now we just bring the king in. He's on the edge, and we go back to the pattern of the king on the edge. And there you go. That's a checkmate. All right, so that's this technique. So now I'm gonna do some practice runs to show you how this technique works in practice, and you can do this too. You should try to checkmate the opponent's king, let's say 5 times in a row. If you can do it 5 times in a row, I think you are safe to say that you learn this endgame. So let me show both techniques. So right now I'm gonna use the technique of pushing the king backwards 1 row at a time. So let's say I cut off this row. Also, the computer's thinking a lot. So he moved 1 row backwards. So what I can do is just cut him off again. Okay, I will cut off the king 1 more row. He's attacking my rook, and if he's attacking, anytime he's attacking a rook, you can just move the rook to the other side, and you'll take many moves to attack it again, in which case you can bring your king in. Okay, so I'm gonna get my king closer. Okay, so now if I put my king in front of his, he can run away, but I'll get back into the pattern of the chasing the king pattern. So in this case, he couldn't go here because I was going to push him back, so he has to move towards the side. And now we just chase. All right, he's into position, so we can push him back. And now there's many of these moves actually work, but I want to get in this pattern of like 1 square behind and chase the king. All right, the rook is attacked, so we just move it to the other side. All right, now we're in the same pattern as before, where we want him to step in front of us, so we just have to waste the move. And now we're back to chasing the king. And it's going to be checkmate next move. And there we go. So this is the first pattern I showed. Now let's try again with the other pattern. So the other pattern said to bring the king in the center first. So I'm going to do that as much as I can. All right, I can go either way. Okay, let's go towards the center. Okay, now let me bring my rook in somewhere to create a area that the king cannot escape. So in this case, I noticed I could try to bring my king in and make the box. But I also noticed that there's a similar pattern where he has to either step in front of me or move backwards. So I'm just going to waste the move with the rook. And then he's into position, so I'm going to push him backwards. And now I can defend my rook. And this is the area that is protected now. And if we can make the area smaller on another, if we can move the rook to a protected square to make the area smaller, we should. So if we move the rook here, the area becomes smaller, so I should do that. All right, same thing. This makes the area smaller. All right, no more rook moves, so I just bring my king closer. There's no rook moves to make the area smaller because he's really diagonally next to me, so I'm just going to move my king. All right, there is a square that makes the area smaller. All right, there is a square that makes the area smaller, and also he's on the edge. So now that he's on the edge, I can go back to my edge patterns. So here, I just have to move my rook back, or I could even just go here, forcing him to go back, and then I could checkmate. All right, I hope you learned how to do this. Practice 5 times, and if you can win 5 times in a row, you're good. Thanks for watching.